Yo, holy shit. Okay, now, you need to know before anything else is that I've spent a fucking arm and a leg to be here at all. I'm on holiday. I'm using my girlfriend's laptop. I can't run game sound or I drop below 20 FPS on Brawl. I can't play Brawl much. I'm only going to use the actual game client for like a tiny bit of this. And I'm only locally recording on this. The first time I'm doing anything and I'm not streaming it, which I find really, really weird. Okay, I should look at you, shouldn't I? Usually, I'm used to my webcam being off to the side, but because it's a laptop webcam, it's right in front. But yeah, anyway, I've pulled an arm and leg to get anything out, so you're going to have to take what you get, I'm afraid. Okay, anyway, today I want to look at two terms, tempo and momentum. They are something that gets thrown, well, tempo not so much. Momentum is something that's seen by spectators in fighting games quite a lot. We will, you see it happen, okay? You see like someone going 2-0 up in a set, and then the reverse happens. It goes to 2-1, and then the person who does the 2-1 pulls it back to a 3-2. And then even within a single match, you seem to see a sense of like momentum going back and forth. Like anyone who's been around fighting games for long enough has seen it, but no one's really able to talk about why, what's going on with it. Everyone accepts it, that it's a real legitimate thing, but no one has really explored it or tried to understand it. Well, they've tried, and a lot of top players do understand it, but they may not be able to articulate it, which is sort of the point of what I'm doing here. Tempo is essentially, it's what we're going to look at first. It's the same thing as momentum, but on a much smaller scale. And the word tempo actually comes from trading card games, or TCG, like Hearthstone. I find that games like Hearthstone, any kind of sort of slower paced game, has very good vocabulary that we don't tend to use because like we're fighting game players, we just want to kill, kill, kill. We don't think too much. But I'm going to take the word tempo from, like, you may be familiar with it already from Hearthstone, and I'm going to apply it across. And it's, I think, a really important comparison. But yeah, also I'm going to do this in one take, so you're going to have to like deal with me blabbering about a little bit. But again, I literally have only like 9 minutes. No, I've got a little bit longer than that, but I've got people arriving, so I've got to go eat dinner. But yeah, and at this time I've also written things down. Holy shit. I'm not going to go completely unscript. Don't worry. I don't think I can ever do that. I hate like talking into a screen already is just really weird, but dictating to a screen is 4 times weirder, so fuck that. No. Where are we? Okay. Tempo and momentum. We're going to talk a little bit about what they are, just browse around. Really, these I think I'm going to start this as a separate series called like a talking points or discussions or something, where I just want to get the concepts on the table so that when I do the daily Brawlhalla daily, I can look at in-game stuff and really look at applying things, look at specific weapons, specific matchups, and trying to help you with that, help you actually improve. This is more about putting concepts on the table so that we can work with them in the future. If they work for you, they may not work for you. You may not find them useful at all. I find them very useful. I just enjoy spending time thinking about this kind of thing, and it does actively help my play. But it won't for everyone. And also, this is relatively. I'll put this like relatively advanced stuff. So if you don't understand it, I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. You may need to put some extra thought into it, or look around at the other games. Like I said, you can find this sort of stuff in Hearthstone, in other fighting games. It's not too hard, it's a common struggle. I literally have a definition of tempo off of the Hearthstone wiki because I thought it was quite a useful one. But what it really is, okay, to begin with, is tempo and momentum sort of come under this same idea, and that's using time as a resource. Using time as a resource, and we're going to keep coming back to that. It's really important to understand this. All things that happen are in the context of time. They happen in real time. X action takes X amount of time. Y action takes Y amount of time. Like, everything has a real time context. And especially including, and this is the important part, including our thoughts, including what happens in here, it takes real time. Now, hopefully, you've watched my last Brawlhalla Daily, where I talked about structuring pressure and how I talked about stagger, which is the act of sort of breaking apart your opponent's understanding of what's going on and then forcing them to... Is that what I was going to say? I think I fucked myself. Into a corner. Using decision-making as a resource. Fuck it, we'll scratch that. We're going to carry on going with the base point. A great example of using using time as a decision-making resource is something like blitz chess. For those of you who don't know, like blitz chess or speed chess, is you play chess, both opponents have a timer, you take your turn, hit a little button, and your opponent's timer starts to run down while they think about their turn. So on average, say each player may have 5 minutes to make all the decisions they need to make throughout the entire game. And if they run out of time, they lose. It's as simple as that. And I'm going to try and bring that to context here and how it works, how you can use it, how you can exploit it, how you can understand it and recognize when it's happening to you. But, yeah, important thing to understand before we go is it's real. All of your actions relate to something, like have the context of time, how long they take, right? How long it takes you to get ready to do them. Any kind of thought, anything. It's not quantifiable in frames. It's always different. But there is a relation. Okay, I'm not gonna say oh, you can count how many frames that you're thinking in. It's retarded. Like there's no point. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. But it's important to know that there is an amount of time that it takes to do things. And this idea of using time as a resource to make decisions in game is really important. Okay. So, assuming time is a resource, tempo is the act of pushing a time advantage. So in a position where you would have more time than your opponent to think, playing your tempo, pushing your tempo advantage is a huge deal. How do I talk about this? It's such a broad topic. So there's 100 different angles to stab at it. So I said pushing a time advantage. Probably I should start with how do you get a time advantage in the first place, and what is a time advantage in the context of Brawlhalla. So yeah, go on. I'll start with an example. I talked about stagger in my last video. Stagger being when you break down your opponent's mental state, their understanding of the game, forcing them to react to what's happened before they can before they can construct a plan to move forward. So let's say, let me find, I'm literally got Brawl, sorry for the resolution, I've got Brawl open in 400 by 200, it's like this big on my screen, otherwise it just doesn't run. So let's say Teros is jumping. Teros thinks I'm scared of him. He thinks he's baiting me. Let's say he has an axe, okay? You've all seen a jumpy Teros like this, but he'll usually be double jumping. Let's say I pick him out the air with this, my girlfriend's laptop fucking frame skip buttons don't work. Fuck it, you get the idea, okay? I'll pause it. That doesn't work at all. You get it anyway. So I hit the Teros. Teros didn't expect to be hit. Teros had planned for what would happen next, but hadn't planned for what would happen if he got hit. Teros has to react to the fact that he has been hit before he can begin constructing a plan and thinking about what I will do. I mean, as high-level players, this Teros bot, high-level players, okay, we would constantly be trying to work out what the other person is doing or thinking or intends to do and what will happen next, what the next step in the game forward is. And let's say I hit the Teros and his mentality just breaks down. He says oh shit. He says in his head, it's a reflex. Oh shit, I got hit. And then two things can happen. Okay, first thing that can happen is he will act by habit, or he will act using a natural reflex. He has no plan. His plan is fucked. But he knows that he's in danger, right? He knows that, let's say, I'm gonna do a chase dodge dare. So the Teros instinctually, without thought, because he hasn't had time to think, okay? He hasn't got time to think, but he knows that he doesn't have time to think. The Teros tries to jump away. Now, that's exploitable for one thing. I can just follow that. But first, we'll talk about this. The second thing that can happen is that the Teros may or may not recognize that he's in danger or feel the pressure, but he tries to construct a plan to deal with it, but is too slow. It's not the speed that he's thinking at, it's the amount of time he has. I'm ahead of him mentally, because when I began my jump scare, literally, perhaps even before I begin my jump scare, I'm prepared for what will happen if my scare will hit, because I wouldn't have done the scare well, this is not always true, but a lot of the times I wouldn't have done the Sair if I didn't intend to hit. So the moment I decide to Sair, my mind leaps to the post-hit Sair situation. So I've Saired him, I know he's in hit stun, I know what damage he's at, so I know roughly what distance we're going to be. I know all this by habit, by training, by repetition, and by experience, and therefore I'm already thinking a step ahead. Now, depending on the skill level of the player and how hard I maybe caught him, maybe he really thought he was invincible, maybe he didn't really care, like he's got a fast reaction time and he recovers quite quickly from being hit by the Sair. Regardless, in majority of cases, against most opponents, the ones that aren't like trained killing machines like the Brain or the Exo, Daiku, sorry, there's going to be is going to be some disparity in the amount of time a player has to act in order to make plans, in order to perceive what's going to happen next. So let's assume I'm crushing a new Teros, okay? I hit them with a jump Sair. I already know their options. I know what's what commonly happens when this kind of player is in this situation. I do all my calculating, but I also factor in the idea that he doesn't have much time to think, and that he's not going to be efficient with that time because he's a weak player. So let's assume that in that situation, I literally just do the most simple follow-up. I just do a chase dodge dare, which in my opinion is a terrible follow-up, just as like a gun thing. It's a really bad follow-up, but I'm factoring in so many things, and I think I'm so far ahead mentally. I have so much tempo that I can actually just go and hit him, and he won't be ready for the idea that he could be hit. He'll be so maybe he's like, this is something actually you'd see in more thoughtful players, is they don't like to act if they don't feel like they can justify their action. So even though they may feel threat coming, because they aren't mentally prepared, they just don't act and they just get hit. You just hit them. A more say jumpy, reactive, aggressive player may get hit, feel the danger, and then just act out of habit. His fingers may literally just press jump and attack, or they may literally just press attack. And you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of what tempo does, but the advantage is there. You have longer to consider these things than your opponent does. And that's a huge deal. It's a massive deal. Pushing or creating that advantage can often be accidental. It's a lot about seizing it. You know? Like something completely out of the scope of both players' minds can happen. You both get sort of mildly staggered. You both suffer this breaking apart and you have to react to something. So say a move drops, okay? A perfect example is when a move drops, or a random bomb or weapon throw that acts in a way that, or a hitbox that acts in a way that people don't expect. If you have a significantly faster trained recovery time, you are losing less time than your opponent, and therefore relatively, you have more time now. You have a tempo advantage. And there's many ways you can sort of abuse that. But again, we're still just talking about sort of what tempo is, where tempo can come from. We'll move on to how you abuse it or exploit it later, though I do have to go soon. I really need to be quick with this. Just for peace of mind as well, before we move on, I'm going to stop this terror spot jumping. I'm going to throw at you the definition I took down off one of the Hearthstone wikis of tempo, because their words may work better than mine, and it is a complicated concept, and we will keep going on it, probably for quite a while. I don't know if I'll even touch on momentum that much, because momentum is basically just tempo on a bigger scale. I'll touch on that after, whatever. Okay, this is a definition taken from the wiki of Hearthstone. Tempo describes momentum on a smaller scale. It is one of the major types of advantage a player may have. Tempo is concerned with a player's control over the game in the immediate and short term. The player's control over the game in the immediate and short term. Now, that last bit, control over the game, what does that mean? It's basically what I just talked about. So assuming both players have honest and competitive intention, so they're intending to win, right? Their thought processes make sense in that line of thinking, and they're of evenly matched skill level. It is not ridiculous to think that if one person gains a slight tempo advantage over the other, they will be able to correctly predict what the opponent is going to do. Or if not, they may not be able to correctly predict it, but they may be able to play around it. They may be able to start covering options and start thinking about covering more options, the options that are more likely than others, and they're more likely to get value out of the situation. what it really comes down to is the person who has the tempo, who has recovered first, and therefore also has the opportunity to act meaningfully first, is the one asking the questions, is the word that someone in Hearthstone might use. They have initiative. They are driving the game forward with what they do. So, and that's a pretty good way of putting it, because it's not so much about making a read into making a read into making a read into making a read. A lot of it is really, really simple. It's not about reads. It's in a really simple example. See, I hit the Teros. The Teros is staggered. The Teros becomes reactive, and then I can just, if I'm fast enough, if I have the time I need, because again, tempo is relative. I can have a lot of tempo. For example, I knock Teros all the way off the stage. Tempo advantage is there, but it's not relevant because he's going to recover from it by the time we get to a place where we can interact and fight. He's going to, by the time he gets back to the stage, he's going to be doing absolutely fine mentally. I mean, sometimes this isn't the case. If you rush out and edgeguard someone when they don't expect it, sometimes they just get hit by the simplest shit, right? And it's just because they were so blown away, and also at the same time they didn't expect you to make such efficient use of your time, to make such an aggressive movement using your tempo, and they just get hit and die off the edge, or yellow by a sword stare, something like that. Anyway, I just tangented, and I can't remember where I came from, and I'm mad at myself now. Oh man. Okay, yeah. Let's assume I hit the Teros, and with a Sare on the ground like this, and he instantly becomes incredibly reactive. So what do? I give him a physical stimulus that says, I'm gonna attack you. I'm gonna move my hurt box near you. For example, I will jump as if I'm gonna dare him again. Now, Teros, who is reacting in a reactive mode, because he needs to in order to start thinking again. And this doesn't apply. This is the weird thing, right? With tempo and momentum and all this stuff, it really depends on the player level. A worse player could do anything. When you're, like I said, when you're down on tempo, you only really have two options. One is to work to get tempo back in very small ways, and the other is to sort of attempt an outplay. And that's the mistake a lot of... no, it's not really about that. Never mind. I'll move on to that later. What this is more about is just that noobs aren't really paying attention to what's going on. They aren't tapped into the game as much. They are more likely to make decisions that are seemingly random to you because they are out of context, because the noob is thinking what the noob is thinking. The noob is not so tapped into the game. He isn't following a logic similar to yours, assuming you're a good player. All right, so I hit him with the Sare, and then now I just want to present something. I want to present an idea. I'm just going to show him something that he can react to. And what I'm going to say is, watch out, Teros, I'm going to dare you. Deal with it. Deal with my dare. Now, he has an axe. He's probably just going to anti-air me. Basic response, he wants to not get bodied by me. He throws out his anti-air, and this is what I would do, something like this. Bam. I would dash behind, or I could do this. Bam. Anything like that. I would push the stimulus towards him, make him feel like he's going to be attacked. He reacts to that sense of danger, throws something out, I punish it because I was prepared for it. And the thing about this, and the thing that's so important about tempo, like I said, it's not about making perfect reads. If he doesn't delight, I'm still fine, right? But you can choose relatively safe options and you can choose riskier options, but in this example, I'm completely fine. And I used this analogy before when I was streaming. It's like a shot on goal. In football, in soccer, if you're American, technically, generally, the more shots on goal you have, the more attempts at scoring you have, the more likely you are to score. And I mean, it does make sense in context. So yeah, you're getting a shot on goal. Depending on how confident you are, depending if you have the read or not, you may not have the read, but you may recognize you have a tempo advantage. You can do more or less. You can do something quite safe. You can do something incredibly risky. But the point is, you've got an advantage, and then you push it. Now, let's imagine I'm against a slightly better player, okay? And he thinks that I'm going to bait. Like, he knows that once he's hit, he's baitable. He knows that if he's at a tempo disadvantage, that if he's coming to understand the state of the game slightly later than me, a common move that a good player will pull is to try and bait you into throwing out an attack. And so he waits for my jump. He waits for my jump bait. Oh fuck, I can't even input on this keyboard. And then delays his anti-air. So when I do this double jump over, bam, at this spot here, I get delighted. I get fucked. Now, in that case, that's not the best example, actually. This is assuming that the Terros would do something aggressive. Often people will act defensively by nature, and really that's up to the player. But let's assume this Terros is of an aggressive nature. He's not happy with the fact that he's getting beat up. And let's assume he really wants to just hit this D-Light. He's quite a bad player. He thinks, I'm going to hit this D-Light on this fucking Ada who's going to try and bait me. So he's a decently good player, because he knows he's going to get, like, he knows that I'm trying to bait him, and he reads it, but he's not really acting out if he just stands there and then waits and D-Lights. Like, there's a lot of safer options he could go for. There's more aggressive options. It's not the best option, but we're just using an example, okay? Just using an example. So I went over. Now, what can I do? I can think that he might know that I might bait him, and I can double bait him. That's something that's in this game. I could double bait him. I could use a dodge at the end, just in case, to cover the fact that he may know it's a bait. Or, and this is the kind of sort of mind-blowing bit where tempo and medicine starts to really link together. It starts to really link together, and you can really fuck people up and get these disgusting 0 to deaths. You can not bait him by just attacking him. Now, if Terros wants and believes that I'm going to bait him, he has little incentive, or he has not little, he has reduced incentive to dodge. He may dodge. Again, this all depends on the player. This is so flexible. This idea is so flexible. The key that I really want to tap into is just what having time advantage does for you. What it can do for you. And there's a million, there's infinite ways it can be worked. And these are really simple, really basic examples. And I can't really drill it in hard enough. There's a chance that my example, I may be being too simple here, and it's not going to be easy for you to apply it elsewhere, but hopefully I'm going to get it through. Yeah, so what if I just throw out another hitbox? And that's great, to be honest. Well, Enlight's a better example. I mean, imagine it was a damage that it wasn't true, or I just can't get it true for some reason. Because it would cover his spot dodge. If he did dodge, I could cover it with spot dodge. But fuck. This is so hard to explain, you know. Where shall I go? Where should we go? Where should we go? Let's have a look. We're going to try and clean this up for you, because I don't want it to get too messy. Right, okay. Are we just going to cut it there? We're not going to cut the whole thing. We're going to cut that bit, just there. That was an example of how tempo can work for you. If you have a time advantage, you have longer to think. This is a super general statement, but we're just going to leave it at that for the sake of now. Again, I'm going to go into, I just want to lay the concept down out there so I can go into more depth elsewhere. So if you have more time to think, you are more likely to do something better or of higher value. Now, that doesn't mean you should constantly be looking for time to think, because, like I said, tempo is relative. It's about how much more time you have than your opponent. And one of the best ways this is why I'm a firm believer in playing aggressively, no matter what. And this is, anyone at the top level will play aggressively. And playing aggressively doesn't mean chucking out hitboxes. It means chucking out ideas. It means being purposeful in everything you do as fast as you can. You're not just playing slowly for the sake of playing slowly. Like, if you do that, another player will limit the amount of time you have to think, and then you'll be out of your comfort zone. What I believe is that playing aggressively is great, because what your goal becomes is not to have as much time as possible and outthink your opponent in the long term. Because tempo is not just about these logical thoughts. Tempo is a lot about reflex as well. Like I said with the reaction example, where you're just baiting his actual reaction or reflex to do the D-light based on how he's feeling, not what he's thinking. If the example after that was more about assuming he's a good player, he still thinks you're going to do a level 1 thing. He thinks you're going to bait him. He knows you're going to bait him. And then you either do a level 0 thing, which is just hit him in that case, or a level 2 thing, which would be double bait him, or something along those lines. Fuck. Anyway, yeah, it's all relative, but it's really important. What was I going to say? Yeah, what to do if you find yourself behind on tempo. A lot about this video, right, is not really about teaching you what to do with it. It's teaching you enough for you to recognize it and be aware of tempo and momentum in your games. Because doing that will help you a lot. It will help answer some of these questions that you have, like, oh, what am I doing wrong? What's bad? Like, how do I improve? Being mindful of this kind of thing is what will help with that. And I will do more examples in other videos. But yeah, so that's some of the ways time advantage can work for you. Now, how do you act and how do people act when they're down on tempo? Assuming you're down on tempo, you've just been hit for some reason, or anything happens. Literally anything. Your cat could have fucking stepped on your keyboard, and for a second you had to wash him away. Like, you had to just brush him away, right? Or you could have sneezed. It could be at a high level where you have to constantly maintain high level thoughts, like deep thoughts into the situation of what's going on at a high speed. Blinking, anything, any loss of focus, no matter how momentary, can be a loss of tempo. The reason, this is something you get to see more and more as people get better with the game, because losses of tempo can go by unnoticed. You can lose track of your thoughts and then regain them without your opponent noticing at all. So long as your fingers keep going, there's no way they can know that you're staggered. Like, there's no way they can know that you're behind somehow. So, but as the levels of play go up, as we see more LDZs and just god tier players in general, you'll see advantages come from basically nothing. And really, it's about people recognizing drops in tempo or changes in tempo that are invisible, essentially. Sorry, I think I'm being called for dinner, so I will cut this off soon. But if you do find yourself behind on tempo and try to recognize when you are, you will. Fine. Hello?
Yeah.
Is everyone here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll only be 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. There's a couple of things you need to watch out for. Commonly, when someone is behind on tempo, and I'm sure you've done this, if you don't do it now, you used to do it, there is an urge to try and seize control of the situation, usually with a signature or a heavy button. A great example of this is when you juggle someone, you hit them multiple times in a row, or you've been hit multiple times in a row. You feel the loss of control, and part of that is loss of time. Part of that is loss of time. Assuming you understand the game, okay, you have all the tools you need, it could be entirely loss of time. You feel that you're getting overwhelmed. Suppress this urge to try and seize control. What people try and do is they do these big reaching attempts to outplay the opponent that are ludicrous given the context. But the thing is that you're mentally so far behind, you need to know that you don't understand the context. So you can't make outplays from that position. To make an outplay when you're so far behind, when you have no time to think, is ludicrous. You can go about trying to make this outplay, and it might even happen, after the 6th hit that you tank, you might successfully outplay your opponent, but you tanked 6 hits. It doesn't matter how clever you feel about the fact that you managed to outplay them. Like, you probably didn't come out on top. And there are cases where you can, but we'll move on to that in a second. Before that, suppress your frustration. A huge thing that happens to people when they get hit is they get mad. They don't like being hit. Something's happening to you that you do not want to happen physically, mentally. If you're a competitor, you do not want to be hit. It's as simple as that. You feel that. And that has a big impact. So when you're down on tempo, you have to suppress anger and frustration. A huge example is people ground pounding from the top of the screen. they get juggled, they're like, oh, this sucks, and they ground pound. Or they get hit by a light attack and they GC a move directly out of hit stun. You have to suppress these urges because they are not controlled, and you need to understand that if they're not controlled, like, it's basically RNG. And assuming your opponent is spacing well, is playing things relatively safely, especially if they have a long-range weapon, but even if it's something like guitars, that you have chase dodge invulnerability, you have loads of tools to get around random YOLO hitboxes in this game. So stay calm, and try and achieve calmness if you are frustrated, because the sooner you achieve calmness, the sooner you can rise up, regain tempo, like regain a actionable mental state, a good mental state. Okay, and then the best way to start reclaiming tempo is small, tiny victories. So let's say you've just been bashed and you just get to the wall on stage. Like you've just managed to get to the wall, sorry, off stage, and your opponent's on stage, and you need to work your way back. Do not go for a crazy GC sig. Do not jump, dodge as fast as you can, okay? Do not go as fast as you possibly can. Try to make very small victories. If you jump and your opponent misses an attack that they thought was going to catch you as you came up over the ledge, you could, theoretically, in hindsight, have dodged through that and punished them. But hindsight is 20/20. If you don't get caught, your opponent actually just lost tempo. They lost tempo because they expected to hit you, and now they have to react afterwards to the fact that they didn't hit you, whereas you baited their attack actively, even though you were in a disadvantaged situation. You baited their attack. You've sort of, even though you don't manage to get back onto the wall at that moment, you've neutralized some of your opponent's confidence, some of their tempo, which is a huge deal. So making small victories and being very careful about how you do it. Take safer routes if you need to. One thing I do is when I'm behind on tempo against a weapon that has weak kill moves, I dodge specifically in directions I know where I cannot be killed easily. So let's say I'm against guns. If I'm staggered and I see myself at one jump height above the ground, I dodge diagonally closer to the ground or dodge up. Because if I dodge up, gun recovery, I will be able to react to and jump away. If they nair me, I'm more likely to survive. If I dodge down, longest range moves on guns are side light and neutral light. Those aren't going to kill me. So I've trained myself to do that. So tiny victories. But tiny victories and taking safer routes where, like, taking big risks and trying to make big decisions. It's like trying to make big decisions when you're drunk. When you're drunk, you're literally just mentally slow, okay? That you are behind on tempo in real life. You need to understand you are in game as well, and then act according to that. Treat yourself as if you're drunk in that state. Get yourself up to a better state, and then fight back. Now, the exception is when your opponent, of course, expects you to do this, because mix-ups being overpowered, predictability, unpredictability being what they are in fighting games. If your opponent expects you to start playing safely, that is the exact moment that you outplay. But the difference is your ability to recognize that will come with time and with practice, and it will be controlled, because it may not be controlled, actually. You may act beyond a sense of control, a feeling of control, but your action is justified in that case. You can say, I did that because I believed he thought I was going to play safely and not take risks. And the moment they think you're not going to take risks, that's when you take risks. That's when it's less risky to take a risk. Yeah. Okay. A few couple of points. Like, that's going to be it mostly for now, but a few couple of points that I just missed on, and then I'll do a tiny bit of momentum. A huge amount of seizing tempo, and a huge amount of tempo can be gained, and this is a huge thing when it comes to rising up the ranks, is to do with streamlining your thought processes. So, like I said, when I go for a jump scare, I intend to hit. And if I do hit, before I even hit them, when I went for the jump scare, I was already beginning to think about the post-hit situation. So what I've done is I've cut out a huge swath of time where I don't need to be reactive because I expect something to happen. I'm confident something's going to happen. Okay, I've predicted it will happen. I've cut that out, and I'm thinking ahead of that. And then that, because that's been cut out, right? Those timelines jam together, and overall, they take up less real time. And you can do this with all your combos. A new player may do a jump scare with guns to catch someone's jump, and they may be shocked that their play worked. And that results in them gaining no tempo advantage, no momentum advantage from their outplay. And that's like, I talked a lot about how you make zero deaths happen in my last video. This is a lot of it. It's understanding this time difference and using it, because a lot of people play far too defensively and they never get to make use of this, like a huge combo mechanic. It's less combos. It's less about chaining the hits together. It's more about pressure. It's keeping a sense of pressure on your opponent. When you see someone pressuring someone heavily, picking them apart, it constantly feels one-sided. That's because they're constantly pushing this tempo advantage. They're saying, I'm not going to give you time to think. Why would I give you time to think? I'm just going to keep pushing at you. If I can't turn my tempo advantage into value right now, I'm going to do something aggressive that maintains my tempo advantage. So I'm going to continue approaching you in a way that you just don't expect. Whether that means occupying space that the opponent doesn't expect, jumping when they don't expect you to jump. It's all tiny things, tiny things. A great example would be if you're on let's say you're on guitars and your opponent's on hammer. You predict, right? You predict your opponent jump saring, or just jumping. You predict them jumping at all. You don't even predict them jump saring. You jump preemptively, and you fade into them. Now they jump to jump sare you. You use katana. You beat them out. But perhaps you jump at them. They jump to do the jump sare. They see that you've jumped. They're shocked you've jumped. You've gained time, and now they panic. They panic and they try and jump away again, or they panic and they spot dodge. Now, you, aware of this and trained, and you've been in this situation many times because you play the game a lot and you practice. Again, that's what it all comes down to, of course. You seize that. A great example would be Kyler versus Lanz at BCX, the famous GIMP, if anyone's seen it. Lanz is juggling Kyler with guitar nares, with lance nares. It looks like the tempo is completely in Lanz's favor. Kyler fades away, Lanz overextends. Kyler sares Lanz. Lanz believing, too much believing that he was safe, that he was the aggressor, has overextended, gets punished, and is staggered. In that stagger, Kyler gets a crucial follow-up that almost turned the game around. He chase dodges underneath him and gun recoveries him, killing him at white. Stare into gun recovery, not true. The reason it worked is because of the tempo advantage. Because Lanz didn't understand that he could be behind in that situation. So when he came to being behind, he failed to act correctly. He failed to act at all, actually. He just got hit by a combo that's not true. Okay, yeah. And really, momentum is that on the larger scale. You see sets go to 2-0 and then to 3-2 reverse. It's the person who's up 2-0 has earned themselves 2 games worth of thinking time on broader strategy. So they can play 2 games and not win them, but they have extra time to think, because if you that it doesn't really make sense when you think about it in like the best of 5 format, but you think about it from the reverse position. Okay, think about, you've just lost 2 games. Now you have 1 game. You have 1 game to fix everything, and if you don't, you lose. And that's really fucked up for you. You have to deal with that. You have to know that. You've got to come up with the answers. But the person who's 2-0 up is now way more likely to win the set because they have more time to adjust. But also, what you often tend to see is that good players invest in broader adaptation. So say you lose first game and you're like, shit, okay, I need to adapt. So you play second game out. You're thinking, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? How do I change up? You lose second game by a tiny bit. Third game, you're starting to feel more confident. You're kind of like, your fingers are starting to do what your brain is thinking that they should do to beat this opponent. You play and you crush them. You crush them completely. This goes, so it goes from 2-0, you being 2-0 down, to you being 2-1 up. Now, the person who was 2-0 up has been staggered in a major way. Okay, they believed they were the victor already. They were complacent, essentially. They believed they were going to win. Now, you took that away from them. You staggered them. And this actually genuinely takes up physical time. People are concerned. They start having thoughts. Oh shit! What if I'm going to lose now? What if I get reverse 3-0'd? And this is the mistake they make, is that they give away a lot of their tempo. And this is, I'm going to call it momentum because it's on a larger scale now. We're talking minutes, or multiple sets of small seconds, just with having doubts and stuff, hesitating essentially, and losing confidence. And like loss of confidence is one of the huge things that makes you less efficient with your time. It makes you unwilling to seize opportunities based on how much time you have. Okay, so yeah, now, depending on how, first of all, depending on if the player who was 2-0 up has the tools to adapt, assuming if they don't have the tools to adapt further to beat the play that countered their original play in the first two games, they lose 3-2. Simple as that. They lose. They can't adapt again. They have, the thing is, they've earned themselves 2 games worth of time to adapt, which is exactly the amount of time that the losing player spent getting 2-0'd at the beginning. Now, using that time, assuming they do have the tools that they need to adapt, they get to do exactly what the player who lost just did. They get to spend 2 games. First game probably getting bodied, like that happened. They didn't expect to lose. They did. They didn't do much adapting. Second game, they spend time adapting. Third game, it's relatively even. Both players have had an equal amount of time to spend, like considering things about each other, and really it comes down to who plays better in that game. The fifth game is always so tight. It's always such a great tiebreaker because of this. But yeah, if either player is not able to, like, okay, if that, a lot of it will come down to whether or not, or how well the player who was 2-0 up adapts to losing the third game. If you're 2-0 up and you lose the third game, it can destroy you. If you're 2-0 up and you are prepared to lose the third game, the chances that you lose that set are so small, assuming you have the tools you need. If you aren't a gimmick, or if you're a good enough player where you can counter multiple strategies, if you are prepared to lose in game 3 when you're 2-0 up, you're going to win the set. You're going to win the set if you play properly. It's that simple. And that's a lot of the people, like a lot of the mistakes people make. And in Brawlhalla, because there's so many young competitors, we are seeing a lot of 3-2 comebacks. And yeah, that's my opinion on it in pretty much all games. Anyway, I've got to go. I'm really late. But I just wanted to get something out. There was a lot of rambling in the middle. But fuck it. I think the main idea, the main hope, was to just get the idea on the table. And I will talk about it more another time. And I'm sure people will have questions. If you have questions, stick them in the comments. I will probably make a follow-up video explaining this, clarifying it, because it's a big thing. Read around about it as well. Like I said, like a lot of card games use the terms tempo and momentum all the time to describe this time advantage that you can have over your opponent, relative to your opponent, and how you can exploit it, whatever. Like, there's loads of shit. Go out and look at it, or ask questions below and I'll try and answer them later. I've got to go. Cheers.